Welcome to Feminist Utopia, a community dedicated to envisioning and creating a more just society for all. Welcome to Feminist Utopia. This week we're going to imagine a world where the jobs that women do are valued and given the respect and dollars they deserve. It's back to school time for much of the country, and we thought today we'd talk about teachers and the misogyny that exploits them and also harms our kids.
Back to school time. I'm not looking forward to it.
Lots of emotions with back to school time. It's kind of a renewal. It can be also kind of like New Year's, the time where you're going to be really organized this year and everybody's looking forward to the kids getting back into a routine. And I like back to school time. I liked it as a student and I liked it as a parent.
I have to confess, I always like the sales on school supplies, and I have a really bad habit of buying more spiral-bound, college-ruled notebooks than I ever need. Schools don't start back here until after Labor Day, but they have the display up at Target, and I'm going, I want, but no.
Well, we can purchase and donate.
That's true.
Actually, at a grocery store, you can purchase a pack of school supplies and have it donated. So you just pay $7, and that's one pack of all the supplies that a kid needs.
Oh, that's amazing. I'll look into that.
Yeah. But we also have some other exciting things that are going on. School starts in Houston early, like middle of August early. So we're really getting into it here, and my stepson is going to be a senior this year. So it's kind of an exciting and scary time, too.
Today we're going to cover how teaching has always been part of the pink collar concept, and women have been paid accordingly. We'll talk a little bit about what pink collar is, about how teacher salaries look, and why that damages the children that we supposedly care for.
Right. I wasn't really familiar with the term pink collar until you said something about it. So I did do a little bit of research, and I found that Louise Kapp Howe was the one who popularized the term in the late 70s. And it really is describing the work that women typically do as nurses, secretaries, school teachers. And it was kind of termed to differentiate between white collar and blue collar, because these jobs were not either of those, but it was an office job and it was mostly done by women. So they came up with this whole pink collar idea.
Yeah, it's funny. My mom graduated from high school in 1952 or 53, and she told me her only choices at that time were to become a secretary, become a nurse, or become a teacher. And she hated kids and she hated people. So she thought the only thing she could do in life was to be a secretary. And she went to work for Rand McNally and worked her way up and became a book editor. But that pink collar, the verbiage came in 1970s, but the concept of it had been there for generations.
Oh, exactly. And other people have kind of morphed it and calling it like the pink collar ghetto.
Ooh.
And one of the reasons is because it's really difficult to get out of these pink collar jobs. And women who work in non-traditional jobs usually earn more. But even when you look at women that are holding CEO positions in the top Fortune 500 companies, 70% of these women hold jobs in the pink collar fields, such as cosmetics and food service. So we may be moving up the ladder a little bit, but we're still not moving out of these pink collar jobs.
And we're creating new industries that are considered pink collar. An example would be veterinary medicine. And the only reason I know about this is that my late father-in-law was a veterinarian, and he was the one who pointed it out to me 20 years ago. He said, and I didn't believe him at the time, that once over 50% of the graduating classes of veterinary schools in the nation started becoming female, became less profitable to be a veterinarian. He sold all of the practices in like 2001 to 2 women, and they ended up having to close after several years because veterinarians are making a lot less than they did. And I put a link in the show notes about this, and it continues to drop even though the demand for veterinary services is increasing. There are more people with pets, but then how many of the veterinarians do you know now that are female?
Yeah.
Most of the ones I've seen in the last 10 years have been female. All of my friends that I had at Purdue that were in the vet school were female. They're going in veterinary medicine. It's a super competitive field. It's super expensive to go to vet school.
Yeah.
And they're graduating, and their average salaries, not just measured in real dollars, counting for inflation, but number to number is actually less than it was 20 years ago for new vets.
So doctors, internists, general practitioners, those are increasingly female-dominated professions. And we're already seeing a decrease in pay for medical doctors. I've heard that that's going to be the next pink-collar job.
And that's really true. It's kind of interesting because we have family members that are general practitioners. And we'll get into this when we discuss if we pay them more, we should get better people, right? Isn't that how it works? And that's why GPs are seen as I don't want to say bottom feeders, that's kind of the grunt work. You're not a specialist. You don't deserve X amount per hour. You don't deserve what a cardiothoracic surgeon makes, sort of thing. So we'll get into that with teacher pay. We'll get into the idea that for many, many years, our society has been taking advantage of the fact that women were not able to go do other jobs. How are we going to fix this?
Right. Well, I mean, since the first public school system was established in Massachusetts in 1647,
Yep.
localities have struggled to pay teachers and have searched for people willing to do the job for less. And that's one of the reasons why it started to be dominated by women. And the roots of the relatively low pay in teaching lies in sexism. Teachers for many years were necessarily working at suppressed wage levels because they had no other options other than teaching. Like you mentioned, you could be a nurse, a secretary, a teacher. A lot of intelligent, driven women went into teaching because they didn't have any other options. By the 1920s, almost all elementary school teachers in the United States were women, and they were earning marginally more than other professions that were typically women-dominated. You didn't see as big a disparity in the pay as you do now.
But you also saw an interesting way of treating female teachers at that time, I would say at the turn of the century, in the 19th century, as children of the school board in many ways. Their private lives were guided. There were rules about whether or not they could date or marry. And if you married, you lost your job. And it was this patriarchal oversight.
Right.
While paying barely subsistence wages and expecting the women to be grateful for the opportunity to work beyond reason for the wages they were receiving.
Yeah, that's true. But now, over the last half century or so, there's a new world of opportunities open to educated women. We've really failed to accommodate those recent changes. We've kept teachers' salaries artificially low. So when you compare a teacher salary with similar jobs that have similar education levels, teacher pay is much less, 20% lower than that of other professions requiring a college degree. And that was in 2016.
One of the articles, I think it was the Times article, talked about a woman who had 20 years of experience, a master's degree in special education, and she was making $55,000 a year and working two other side jobs to make ends meet. That's beyond low.
It is. And when you add in the costs of living, the student loan costs,
yes,
costs of health care and retirement, that's making the average pay for teachers even less.
my friends have kids that are heading into college now and talking about their future careers, and none of them would even remotely consider suggesting to their children they become teachers because teachers don't make enough to live.
Exactly. And now there's so many other options.
Yes.
And there's other reasons that teaching is not a desirable job anymore. Part of the problem is school districts feel they have to impose work standards on teachers to make sure that they're doing their jobs. So they restrict teachers' creativity and made teaching even less desirable than it is as indicated by the salary. And it gets worse. In some urban schools, principals, they just discipline teachers in front of their students, humiliating the teachers and undermining their authority. This kind of discipline is designed to discourage all but the most dedicated of created teachers.
On both sides of the political fence, both the Democrats and the Republicans have pushed for tying teacher pay to test outcomes. Governor Andrew Cuomo, New York State, the state of Arizona, multitude of Republican governors there who have pushed for it. And it's very popular when you talk to people who are interested and involved with education reform, completely ignoring the fact that sometimes the most creative, amazing teachers have some of the poorest test scores because we're insisting on testing and scoring kids who are in, for example, special education classrooms and holding them to the same standards as more neurotypical students, for example. There are a lot of reasons why that's horrible. But it's one thing, it seems, that both sides can agree on, is that we need to punish the teachers if we think our kids aren't getting what they need, instead of looking at our budgets and looking at how we're paying teachers and how we're treating teachers. The disrespect to teachers is so American. Like you said, it started back in the 1620s. But there was an interesting study that showed how in other areas teachers are tremendously respected. In Asia, it was Malaysia and China specifically, people want their kids to become teachers. I have a friend that's a teacher in Japan. There's a ton of respect for teachers. She's paid reasonably well, close to market. The students are respectful to her.
Mm-hmm.
People are respectful to her. They don't say, oh, you get summers off, because they don't really. They have to do a bunch of in-service work, not unlike American teachers. And it's also true in Europe. Teachers are viewed differently.
Yeah, my son-in-law is a teacher in France, and he is very highly respected and well regarded, and he loves his job. He teaches littles, like 3 and 4-year-olds.
Woo!
Their school starts at 3 years old, and he has an amazing vacation schedule that is enviable. And a lot of times the parents are involved in the school, and he gets invited to their homes, and I can't even count how many times that his kids just adore him, and their parents invite Ben out to have dinner in their home and just say, oh, my kids love you so much. And then they've gone on to become friends with the parents.
Wow. First of all, the idea that someone who's teaching preschool, which is even held in lower regard than elementary school teachers, you don't have to have a college degree in the United States to do that. You can have an associate's or a certificate. That the parents treat him with respect, too. Mm-hmm. A lot of my friends that are teachers don't have a lot of that coming their way, especially those that are in high school. It's, why did you grade my kid like this kind of stuff.
Right. I think that the expectations we put on teachers to not only educate our children, but to control their behavior and be responsible for their moral upbringing and civic education, it's just overwhelming.
It's telling to me that as we've seen a decline in respect for teaching as a profession, it's also the time when the teachers' unions have begun declining as well.
Right. And a lot of that, I think, is due to politics and reflects state policy decisions. There's a lot of right to work states
Yes.
that are eroding the unions. Being in a union has helped teachers somewhat, but it isn't panacea.
Yes.
Being a union doesn't protect you from a pay gap, but it does
Yes.
help make the gap smaller.
Yes.
And like you mentioned, the share of teachers in a union has fallen to less than half. And part of that is because older unionized teachers are retiring, and maybe the younger teachers coming in don't recognize what was fought for and won by the unions.
Boy, that's an ongoing theme, isn't it?
Yeah, right. But there's been legal challenges that have curtailed the ability of unions to bargain.
Yeah. The Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, boy, I hate saying that phrase. Ugh. She actually said to teachers in West Virginia that were striking to get a 5% raise that they were not thinking of the students. They were putting themselves ahead of the others. Meanwhile, a tremendous number of these teachers were on state assistance like food stamps and other things because the salaries had been driven so low.
Right.
And then you've got Scott Walker in Wisconsin who did everything he could to bust the unions there, teachers' unions included.
Right. I mean, he used them as scapegoats, saying that it was their retirement that was putting them into debt, and blaming the teachers and their unions for blocking reforms such as linking pay to test scores and increasing funding for charter schools. And it's just not fair. A lot of teachers don't have the option of contributing to their own retirement plans. It's mandated that they do a state-sponsored teacher retirement program.
Yes, and if they're not allowed to contribute to Social Security in Texas, my understanding was Texas teachers were not paying into Social Security. They were paying into their state pensions. And so when not this year's ledge, but the one from 2 years ago, was working on cutting pensions, the teachers were rallying saying, wait a minute, we paid into it. And the GOP official talking point was, you're just a bunch of takers. Here's the problem. Everybody in Texas knows a teacher. Mm-hmm. And some of them are Republicans even. So it was an interesting time. And Andrew Cuomo, for example, blamed teacher unions for trying to block funding of more charter schools and, quote, stopping progress, end quote, completely ignoring the data, which is very clear that charter schools provide lesser education.
Right. And they don't have enough oversight.
Yes.
Also, there's other programs like Teach for America. And I think that they further erode the professional nature of teaching and help to drive down salaries because they have the idea that all teachers need is a good attitude and a summer school's worth of education. And then they can be a teacher.
And boom, they're going to be a more effective teacher because their attitude is better and it's going to save education. The fact is, a lot of those people do it for 2 to 3 years, leave the teaching field, and then go work for educational companies.
Right. And they're subsidized starting salary.
Yes.
So that's attractive to school districts because they don't have to hire a fully qualified professional at the official starting salary. They can hire this Teach for America teacher that has their salary subsidized. So they're actually pushing out more experienced, better qualified teachers.
And that brings us to new teachers in general. When you get your classroom, you learn that the school district isn't going to give you anything for it. If you want a room with a reading center and if you want a room with stuff up on the walls and educational materials, the school district doesn't pay for most of that. So what happens? Teachers start paying for it out of pocket. And at least up until the most recent Trump tax reform, they could write it off, but that's gone.
Well, they can still, as I understand it, write off up to $250, which amounts to $30 to $60 in savings on their taxes, really.
It's the disrespect of it, though.
Yeah. This study came out in 2018 for the school year that was 2015. 94% of public school teachers in the United States pay for supplies without reimbursement. 94%.
Exactly. And it didn't matter where they were. It wasn't like, oh, the city's districts paid more. No, this was across the board. This was rural districts, city districts, suburbs, wealthy suburbs, including wealthy suburbs in Houston or Chicago or New York.
Right. And the average amount spent was $479. An astonishing 7% reported spending more than $1,000 to outfit their classrooms with paper and pens and flashcards and posters, stuff that should be provided.
I wonder if those were new teachers, because what I've seen with my teacher friends is like the first couple of years are super expensive.
Oh, that could be. I know my husband recently supported a teacher. She had put an Amazon wish list. Someone that he knew from high school was starting at a new school and had an Amazon wish list for what she needed for her classroom. And he utilized that to send her, I think it was a whiteboard and markers.
And you would think that would be a basic supply provided by the school district.
Right. If we talk about American exceptionalism, it is not happening in the schools. We are not funding our public schools in America. And I think that they take advantage of the fact that educators want to help children.
Yes.
And as long as the kids in their class lack the essentials, teachers and educators will continue to figure out how to get them what they need. And a lot of times that means paying out of pocket.
So,
if you have the opportunity, volunteer at your local school. Become a tutor. Just listening to kids read is helpful. If you have only an hour, you can speak to a class about your career path. You can help in the library, chaperone a field trip, join your parent-teacher organization.
And I do think a lot of school districts heavily rely on their PTOs, PTAs to get stuff done. And if you have the opportunity, volunteering to help or donate to a PTA or PTO in a lesser funded school district is a really awesome thing to do.
I was on the PTA while my daughter was in school, and I chose to help on time-limited events. So I did like the book drive every year. And then I did my little event and was done. I wasn't going to be the secretary or the treasurer or the president, but give me the book drive. Give me the, holiday party. Give me something time limited, and then I could do my thing and be done and contribute.
Another way you can contribute is just remaining aware of what's going on in your district. You could take part in the local Facebook groups that have discussions about it. And I became such a vocal supporter when I lived in Texas. And then right around the time I moved, I had someone contact me and ask me if I was interested in running for the school board. No one knew that I had never put my son in that school district. I was still involved with it, even though I didn't have a child in it. Mm-hmm. Because our school districts, these are our future kids. Whether or not your kid is in it, whether or not you have a kid, these are your future butt wipers. These are your future doctors. These are your future everything, whether you like it or not.
Right.
You can't ignore it and hope it's just going to magically get better.
Another way to support your school is actually supporting your public library.
Yes.
Because students who don't have books or internet access at home, the library is an invaluable resource and fill a gap for these students. So if volunteering at school isn't your thing, maybe you can take some time and get involved with your local library.
And one of my absolute favorite things is to show a teacher that you care. And it can be something as simple as what your husband did and donate to a teacher's classroom, or it can be writing a note to a teacher that helped you or helped someone you know. Because it's hard out there when people are saying that you're the cause of the ruination of the state's budget.
Right. So, yeah, show a teacher you care. And there is an organization called DonorsChoose.org, and we'll put a link. And that's a place where you can search by city, by school district, and teachers in those areas put up their wish list, and it's a non-profit, so it's tax deductible, and you can know exactly what you're funding, where it's going, what you're purchasing. So if you can donate money, I would encourage you to take a look there and see where you can help.
And there's always the option of just holding your local politicians' feet to the fire on school funding, as always, especially your state legislators.
Right. We do appreciate your taking the time to listen to us today and hope that you have a good week.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us today at Feminist Utopia. If you like our work, please give us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you access our podcasts so others can find it as well. You may also become a Feminist Utopia patron at patreon.com to show your appreciation. Remember, patrons get perks.
And check out our blog and other resources at our website, feministutopia.net. Email us your idea of what a feminist utopia would look like or any questions to info@feministutopia.net. We appreciate you taking the time to listen and grow with us. Feminist Utopia is created by Debbie Williams and Benita Malone.